Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
You know, these people are hurting our economy and destroying our oceans.
The hidden threat. Divers find 250 illegal crab traps off a Vancouver beach. Also,
it's really relieving and it's really gratifying to know that we're sort of being recognized as essential workers.
Restaurant workers line up for COVID-19 vaccinations.
And leaked documents reveal much more about the impact of the virus in BC.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. We begin tonight with more than 250 illegal crab traps discovered just meters away from a popular Vancouver beach.
As John Hernandez reports, the startling find reveals a growing problem along our coast.
There we go.
Chris Sampson and Kian Zhao spend many of their days suiting up and scouring the ocean floor.
We hold our breath and we harvest from the ocean. We go down there quite often to spearfish, and spearfishing is a really selective, sustainable form of harvesting.
They were out for a dive near Vancouver's Jericho Beach on Monday when Sampson found a mysterious line below the surface.
Towards the end of the dive, I decided to pull on it and see where it led me. And it led me to one trap, which led me to another trap, and so on and so forth.
A row of illegal crab traps with no identifiers nor floats.
That's an illegal crab trap. People drop them here and use the GPS to locate them, and then they drag a line at nighttime and pick them up.
So he reported it to Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Over the next few days, crews uncovered more than 250 of them.
So legal gear could be taking undersized crab and females, and that's the backbone of the breeding population.
Illegal poaching has been a growing concern for fisheries officers along the BC coast. Over the past few years, thousands of traps have been pulled up in hotspots like Boundary Bay. But tracking down the actual poachers remains a big challenge.
No one leaves their name, their calling card on this illegal gear. We pretty much have to catch them in order to prosecute.
For hobby harvesters like Sampson, the cycle is infuriating.
It hurts the commercial guys doing it legally. It hurts us going out into the ocean, trying to bring some food home. You know, these people are hurting our economy and destroying our oceans.
So he has some words of warning.
There's people out there like me watching.
The DFO says it's on the hunt for those responsible who could face jail time and hefty fines. They're asking British Columbians to report any suspicious activity on the water, especially when it happens at night. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Dozens have gathered tonight to remember a BC corrections officer shot and killed last weekend.
Bikramdeep Randhawa's death, part of an ongoing escalating gang violence in Metro Vancouver, but it's still unclear why he became a victim of it all.
Our Mira Baines is live at the Candlelight Vigil in Delta tonight. So Mira, what are you hearing from people there?
Well, Mike and Anita, I spoke to friends and family of 29-year-old Bikramdeep Singh Randhawa. He was a provincial corrections officer who wanted to become an RCMP officer. And that's what a lot of his friends and family are saying. And they were talking about his dedication to law enforcement and about his future and what he wanted to do. But yet they still don't know exactly what led to his shooting. They have no idea. It's still very much shrouded in mystery. Now, dozens of people are here at Scottsdale Mall in the parking lot. Now, they're all sort of sparsely spaced, and they plan on holding a candlelight vigil very shortly and to remember Bikramdeep Singh Randhawa. He was killed on Saturday at around 5 p.m. when the car he was in was shot at. Now, there was some witness video that was taken from the scene that showed a potential suspect getting into a vehicle with other people into an SUV, which was then found burning in Burnaby a short time later. Now, this vigil is going to start very shortly, as you can hear behind me. Delta police say they haven't identified a motive in his killing. We spoke to his brother, his older brother, Dupinder Singh Randhawa, and a friend. This is what they had to say.
There's nothing I can say, because if there should be anything, he will let me know about this, but there's nothing like this. So even I'm confused why this thing happened and who can do this.
I couldn't think of anything else. I was driving and it was shocking. That's all I can say.
And that was a friend who had just spoken to him right before this incident happened. Now, his brother Dupinder Randhawa says their parents, who are in India, will be arriving here shortly. Now, both he and his brother came here when they were just 14 years old.
Okay, and Mira, what's the latest on the investigation?
Well, Delta Police held a news conference earlier this week, and we heard from the mayor, and we also heard from the Delta Police chief. Now, they say that they're using drone technology to take footage of the scene, and they want people to submit any videos or photographs of the scene to an online portal. So they want people to upload their material to that website so they can take a look at it and analyze it as well. And so that's the latest in this investigation. Right now, a lot of people have questions about what may have led to his death. People that know him, that have known him for years, and they say they have no idea. They say that he was a very humble and caring person, and he was looking forward to a career in law enforcement.
All right, Mira, thanks very much. Mira Baines live in Delta tonight. Leaked reports are revealing more tonight about the scale of COVID infections in BC.
Among the findings, that COVID rates are highest among the poorest and most diverse sections of Surrey, while vaccination rates in those same areas are the lowest.
As Justin McElroy reports, the government is under fire for withholding data from the public.
For weeks, CBC News has asked the provincial government for COVID-19 data in what are known as community health service areas, individual neighborhoods and communities throughout Metro Vancouver, where case counts have been counted this entire time but not revealed to the public. And then just yesterday, that information was released publicly through a leak from the BC Centre for Disease Control. It forced the province to hold an emergency press conference this afternoon to talk about how they deal with data and why they haven't been sharing community numbers this entire time. And it was during that the government said they actually have, in their minds, been providing appropriate levels of information.
We do release almost all of that information that was in some of the reports that were posted.
The problem is that's not true. The government has never, in this entire pandemic, provided vaccination data or positivity rate data at a local health area level, to say nothing of community health service areas levels. The province did commit in this press conference to providing that information in the weeks ahead, but didn't give a set timeline, and it ended with reporters who have been pushing for more transparency this entire pandemic with more questions ultimately than answers given. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
And while there is plenty to parse out in this data, so coming up, we'll talk to COVID modeler Killeen about the data and what it revealed, what it also tells us about the spread of COVID in our communities.
To the latest numbers now, 7 more COVID-19 deaths in BC today, 722 new cases. 445 people are in hospital, 157 in critical care, and more than 2 million doses of the COVID vaccine have now been administered.
It is good to be vaccinated, in my opinion.
And as part of its outreach program targeting high transmission communities, Fraser Health setting up a vaccine clinic at Agudwara in Surrey today. More than 46,000 people received a COVID-19 shot yesterday across the province, the second highest daily case number in the campaign. Around 45% of those eligible have received at least one dose. And starting today, some restaurant and hospitality workers are being prioritized for a vaccine.
Those in the Vancouver coastal health region are now eligible to book an appointment.
Our Tanya Fletcher caught up with some of the moments before they got the jab.
Getting vaccinated! Excited, nervous, like Christmas.
It's a familiar sentiment and a familiar sight these days outside the Vancouver Convention Centre. Lineups snaking along the waterfront filled with people eager to get their first shot. But suddenly, something is different. Look at who is in the queue, and you'll now find restaurant and hospitality workers among the crowds. A surprise, even to them.
We were Not really expecting it, but we're obviously super excited.
These three are co-owners of Jackalopes Neighborhood Dive, a heavy metal bar in East Vancouver. They're among the many workers who can now make an appointment to receive a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine at one of the clinics for frontline workers. They were contacted directly by the BC CDC and within hours had an appointment booked.
As soon as we found out that we were eligible for this, the whole community kind of all of a sudden started talking and communicating.
Restaurant and hospitality workers were not originally on the province's list of priority vaccinations. So why now? And why only in one health authority? Well, the answer is buried in BC's most recent modeling data. This was presented mid-April, a look at which types of workplaces are seeing the most transmission. In Vancouver Coastal Health, you see restaurants, bars and lounges are overwhelmingly driving workplace clusters and triggering by far the most COVID cases. It's estimated the restaurant industry alone is losing $2 million per day by not having the same level of pre-pandemic activity in the downtown core. And businesses of all stripes are desperate for the corporate workforce to return to the city center.
And if you add the tourism component as well, with no cruise ships now it'll be 2 years in a row, and also no meetings and conventions, this is dramatically hitting that hospitality sector extremely hard.
Meanwhile, 2 hours after getting the jab, it's straight back to work at Jackalopes.
We didn't hurt. We feel great. It was a breeze. Everything was awesome. Hopefully this is the first steps towards us getting back to business.
Hanging on to every piece of positivity they can. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
And just a short time ago, Fraser Health also announced it is opening up vaccinations to food service workers.
A Langley woman who contracted COVID-19 is warning the rest of us about getting complacent.
As Sarah Premji reports, she describes her experience as serious and scary.
Suddenly it felt like I had been buried alive. I felt like the air was heavy, my body was heavy.
But that's not how COVID-19 started last month for 59-year-old Sandy Rosine.
You know, I would have thought I would have been just the flu version.
The mom of three figured being an active dance teacher and having no underlying health conditions would mean overall she'd be okay. But that wasn't the case.
Something different was happening. My body seemed to be incapable of lifting up from the bed even.
Her doctor and the COVID-19 hotline both asked about her breathing, which she hadn't noted because of all her other symptoms.
I wasn't moving, and there really was no opportunity, I guess, for us to kind of take note of whether or not I was breathing well.
Finally, 9 days after testing positive, she was advised to go to the hospital. And when she got to Surrey Memorial, reality set in.
You have pneumonia and your lungs are failing, and they're just not taking in oxygen.
The condition? Hypoxia, where the body is deprived of oxygen.
The frequency at which we see this occurring with COVID is unlike anything we've seen before.
The next 4 days were touch and go.
All of us who are in the hospital where we don't know which we're going to be.
She was one of the lucky ones. She started to improve with the help of oxygen, returning home last Friday. As she gets better, she has one more piece of advice for people. Buy a pulse oximeter.
Which is just a thing you put on your finger. You can buy it at London Drugs. And immediately we would have known that my lungs were starting to fail.
Doctors agree it's useful to have at home, given how unpredictable this virus has become.
You know, if you do end up calling an 811 or you're calling your medical professional to ask them, it's a very simple number you can give them, and you instantly have that information available to you as to whether you think you should be in hospital.
Whether you have one at home or not, Rosine can't emphasize enough. Don't underestimate COVID-19. Zara Premji, CBC News, Langley.
A new app is available connecting youth to mental health counseling and support in BC.
When we got to look at the first draft of the app, it was so exhilarating to see some of my input taking shape right in front of my eyes.
Created by youth for youth, the Foundry app is available for users aged 12 to 24. It allows young people to schedule virtual appointments for counseling and peer group support, regardless of where a person is in BC. The province says youth were heavily consulted in developing the app, focusing on ways to help young people dealing with anxiety, depression, and substance use. Well, you've probably received your census request, and you may have already logged on to fill in your data.
Advocates are encouraging people from Hong Kong to avoid putting China and instead write down their home city.
As Susanna De Silva reports, it's to give a voice to those who have been silenced.
Traditional Hong Kong-style barbecue meats have been flying out of this restaurant for over 20 years.
Obviously, other parts of China do have Peking duck and other styles of duck, but this style in particular is kind of created in Hong Kong.
The business, started by father Eric Leung, now son Anson, has taken over.
I grew up with that, and I think it's very important for us to keep that culture for us.
Cuisine is just one part of a culture others from Hong Kong say is very unique.
We need to uphold our real identity because we are not the same as Chinese.
Henry Lam and his husband are part of a campaign to encourage people to note Hong Kong as their ethnicity on the long-form census. Last time it wasn't an example to choose from, and officials say anyone who noted it would have been grouped as Chinese, something that can affect government services for Cantonese-speaking Hong Kongers, he says.
When they send out the survey to me, they only give me the simplified Chinese, so aka Mandarin. So this is not our reading language at all.
And beyond the practical reasons, Chinese actions in Hong Kong have given them another motivation for recognition.
And we don't want to be erased. That's what the China government or the PRC is trying to do, okay? And they want to keep the city, but remove the people.
Hong Konger is now an example on this year's long form, and officials believe specific information about them will likely be part of data made public, an important step according to Lam.
We don't want our identity to be fade at our generation because I'm not sure about the future of Hong Kong.
And his way of showing support for friends protesting back home. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Okay, it was a beautiful day, but it was very cold.
Yes, that's behind the cold front for you across Metro Vancouver. I'm glad you noted the temp drop. And depending on where you were in Metro Vancouver, it was either a cold and beautiful day or a cold and my tomato plants are all dead day because of hail or graupel that came down. Right now, it's a beautiful blue sky day. Let's see if I can take you on a bit of a tour here. Blue skies above. We've got some building cumulus off towards the northwest, but generally looking at a beautiful evening out there right now. Let me take you to the current temperatures. It's chilly, 13 right now at YVR if you're not too dizzy after that. We do have a few cells, though, still tracking across the island. Nanaimo and Ladysmith has been getting hammered with little cells bringing downpours and graupel, which is the kind of hail we get from these storm cells. And we did see some across Metro Vancouver, Port Coquitlam. You had some good isolated cells earlier today. Same story for other parts of the valley. But generally, things are calming down through the evening hours. Not the case for Saturday. I'm tracking another system, but watch as I take you through the overnight. So increasing clouds before the morning hours. Definitely a chance of seeing some morning showers as that system hits our coast. But then it really tapers out, and it's why the models have had such a hard time with the weekend forecast. So Mike and Anita, I'll tell you what I'm thinking for our Saturday forecast and get us through Sunday as well coming up.
I hope you're thinking something good. Thanks, Johanna.
Tensions are high tonight in the fight over old-growth logging on southern Vancouver Island. Protesters were in court today facing possible jail time, while loggers have come under fire for their actions in a showdown with activists earlier this week. First, let's show you some of that again, and a warning. The language you'll hear is racist and offensive.
We've had enough. You and your fucking TPs. You can fuck around with Teal Land. You don't fuck around with us. You'll it's over today. Those guys might not do anything, but we fucking will. You fucking move on.
Loggers entered the activists' camp on Tuesday and appeared to threaten them. Protesters claim one of their own was knocked to the ground by a contractor. The RCMP is now investigating. It's the latest flare-up in an ongoing conflict. After months of protests and blockades, an injunction was granted preventing demonstrators from blocking work. But it only covers certain logging plots. It does not bar activists from the area where Tuesday's showdown happened northeast of Port Renfrew. And it was loggers there who moved in, warning protesters not to blockade their work sites. The CBC's Kieran Oudshorn has been following this conflict for us. Kieran, the situation clearly heated there. How have things evolved since that clash that we saw on Tuesday?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, so following the day right after this incident happened, the company that owns the harvesting rights for this area where it took place, they took pretty swift action. They came out with 7 steps that they were going to take, including stopping all harvesting in the area until they can investigate, as well as hiring a third-party advisor to look into what actually happened. Now, it's interesting to note who actually owns the company that has the harvesting rights. It's a joint venture between Western Forest Products and a company called Humius Ventures LP. And Humius Ventures LP is owned entirely by the Huu-ay-aht First Nation. And I spoke with their director, John Jack. He told me that one of the reasons why they wanted to get involved with harvesting in their traditional territory was not only the economic value, but also because they wanted harvesting to happen along the lines with their traditional values. And to that point, they actually put out a second statement on Thursday saying that they'd watched the video, that the actions of the contractors who were working for them was completely inappropriate. They said that racist language, they said that intimidation and violence had no place on their work sites and no place in society in general. And then finally today, actually, the Huu-ay-aht First Nation, which is separate from the Humius Ventures LP, the Huu-ay-aht First Nation said they're starting to rethink the rules about who can actually access their traditional territories. And they said they're doing that because they allege that a protester drove through safety barricades yesterday at one of their work sites.
All right, so with the activists in court, the loggers under fire, what's going to come next here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, the injunction came into place a month ago, and you know, it's obvious from watching the video that a lot of people who are working within the industry are frustrated that there hasn't been action taken yet by the police. And it's when I've talked with RCMP, it's not clear when they may actually take action, even though they already have an enforcement order to move forward with the injunction. You mentioned that there was some people in court. That happened today. That's because the company, and in this case it's Teal Jones, because they have the harvesting rights for the area where most of the protests are taking place. The company Teal Jones had gone forward with actually collecting evidence about who had been on the site. They served that to several people. Those people were in court. The site actually, the court date today got pushed forward until June 1st. Although the company was asking for arrest orders against 3 of the people who didn't show up today in court, those were also put off as well. So it's not clear what's going to happen next, although I expect from speaking with the protesters that they will continue to be on site. And I think that Teal Jones, the company, based on what they've said going forward, are going to continue to collect evidence about who is not following the rules and who's in contempt of court.
All right, Kieran, we'll continue to follow this. Kieran Oudshorn reporting for us tonight. Thanks.
Well, many people watch us on CBC Gem, so this is a reminder that you can also do that if you're not doing it right now.
All right, CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
In Manitoba, new rules for the province as they register a surge in COVID cases. The latest from Winnipeg coming up.
And just coming up on 6:23 on this Friday night. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, a grassy area next to a church in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, is home to an old, unmarked graveyard.
While there is written evidence of bones being discovered, no one knows how many are there. As Colleen Jones reports, the question for many is, should this area be developed?
There's no signs on this busy Dartmouth corner where Prince Albert meets Portland Street saying there are bodies buried in the ground. But the evidence that this once grassy hill was a burial site goes back to July 1844 and a newspaper article.
And the quote says, "A quantity of human bones comprising the remains of 7 or 8 persons."
That's David Jones, a local historian. He's reading part of the old article that's found in the book his granduncle John Martin wrote, The Story of Dartmouth. His work sparked David's love of history and especially the mystery of what lays buried here. There's other documentation of human remains being found here.
Because Harry Piers visited the site in the summer of 1894 and recorded that he found human remains. He also found a groundstone hammer, and we would associate a groundstone hammer with the Mi'kmaq people. This would be potentially a pre-contact or contact artifact. Now, the sign on St. James will tell you it was founded in 1827, and that's true, but that building was in a different part of downtown Dartmouth. They built this church that we see today in 1870. They also found human remains. And then fast forward 100 years later, in 1970, there was a fire right here on this grassy mound. They found more human remains.
As we walk up Portland Street, more talk of bones and remains.
Now, some of those were exhumed by a professor at the medical school at Dalhousie, and he actually, Dr. Fife, examined those bones. He was trying to determine if he could connect an ethnicity to these burials.
Now, if you're wondering who was buried here, one theory: the remains are from the French crew of the ill-fated trip by Duke d'Anville. In 1746, he was sent from France to reclaim Acadia and Louisbourg. His crew developed scurvy and infection. Many died as they made their way up Halifax Harbor.
And I was told this recently by the daughter of a former minister of St. James Church, and she remembers that some archaeologists came and looked at the burials, and their best guess at the time was that they could be associated with the Duc d'Anville and his men.
So all of this old history is a worry now, simply because this area of Dartmouth is ripe for development.
I want to see the Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage step up and protect this burial ground as an abandoned cemetery.
For now, the mystery of who is buried here and where is still very much a mystery. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Dartmouth.
New restrictions will come into effect Saturday in Manitoba and close the doors to many businesses.
But as Cameron McIntosh explains tonight, critics say it's coming too late.
Restaurant dining, including on patios, is out. So is a visit to gyms, hair salons, and playing organized sports. But you can still shop, and kids are staying in school for now, as urgency rises in Manitoba.
We all need to make personal choices to reduce the amount of contacts that are outside our households, and we need to act now.
Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusin warned the health system is in peril, but stopped short of ordering a full lockdown.
We need a change, and that we need to decrease the contacts that we have. So, I think these are very stringent public health orders.
With 502 new cases, Manitoba posted its second highest daily case count yet. ICU numbers are approaching record levels, as typically younger third-wave patients are staying in care longer, straining the system.
This is going to be worse than the second wave. It's going to be, I think we're already baked in to be as bad as Alberta.
This ICU doctor is one of many who have been warning Manitoba is on a dangerous path.
We could be past our peak and enjoying summer if we had implemented these very restrictions 4 weeks ago.
I say to the Monday morning quarterback, people, sure, we should have, could have, might have.
The Premier, speaking before the announcement, made no apologies for not going further sooner.
Nobody has been able in this country and in most places in the world to keep the third wave out.
It all comes as the province also deals with a court challenge.
That church is essential.
A group of people in 7 churches say restrictions already in place violate their rights to assembly and religious freedom. Pallister dismisses that.
The fact of the matter is we're doing tough things that have to be done to protect people.
Similar court challenges are underway in 4 other provinces. As for today's Manitoba restrictions, they'll be in place at least 3 weeks. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
COVID rapid testing has expanded in Nova Scotia as the situation there worsens. But across much of Canada, it's far different.
Millions of test kits provided by the federal government are sitting on shelves, helping no one. Rafi Bujikanian looks at Ottawa's new plan to fix that.
We're making it even easier for everyone to access these tests.
Ottawa has bought nearly 42 million rapid COVID-19 tests. Only about 2 million have been used. Now the government will offer them directly to businesses and organizations.
Cases have been found in asymptomatic people.
In Ontario, the program will start at 40 different Shoppers Drug Mart locations. Kits will be offered to small and medium-sized businesses who want to test employees.
It's kind of a moot point anyway because I'd already bought 3,000 test kits.
This spa owner says he couldn't wait. His company bought its own tests and he thinks they've eased the minds of both staff and customers.
If we can convince them to have a test, when that little line turns blue and you're negative, there's a visible sigh of relief.
It's not clear why so few tests have been used. Ontario has done better than most but has used only about 12% of those available. The people who run this pilot project say part of the problem is perception.
The challenge really is in trying to get governments and public health organizations to buy into and understand the importance of serial screening, serial testing, as an addition to the other tools that we've got.
PEI officials say it's got 25,000 unused tests, believing they're meant for communities with high infection rates.
So there was that kind of discourse at the beginning where everybody was desperate to get their hands on these tests. And so the feds then responded by trying to get everybody lots of tests. I think, though, that there should have been more back and forth during that time around what kinds of tests are appropriate for which communities.
The feds say they've got one more trick up their sleeve to make rapid tests more widely available. They'll allow them to be ordered directly online. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's military crisis is at the center of a potential political crisis. What exactly did the government know about sex assault allegations?
With an election on the horizon, the opposition is pressing. Hannah Thibodeau reports today they grilled Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford.
I have wondered if I should have further questioned the general when he told me about his commitment to Me Too.
The Prime Minister's most senior advisor admits she didn't press for details about sexual misconduct allegations against former Chief of Defence Staff Jonathan Vance.
I don't think you would want political staff, let alone politicians, looking into, doing their own investigations.
An investigation? Perhaps not. But allegations were brought forward by the military ombudsman against Canada's top soldier.
We didn't know anything about this complaint. We didn't know the substance, the nature, or the details of the complaint.
The Conservatives had one clear question.
Who made the decision
not to inform the Prime Minister?
Who decided not to tell the Prime Minister of the existence of an allegation against the general?
There was no clear answer.
I actually didn't learn about I knew nothing about the complaint. We didn't even have a rumor to go on in this situation. We knew that there was a complaint, period.
Not everyone buys it.
It actually strains credulity that the PMO, PCO, and D&D wouldn't have sought information, wanted to stay in the loop about the substance of the claims of the Chief of the Defence Staff.
And that could become a problem for the self-described feminist liberals in a year when they may want to go to the polls.
It's actually, I'm sure, quite disappointing, not only to many women in the military, but also to many groups and many women outside as well. When you adopt a strong brand, I guess as we call it like that, you have to be prepared to deliver.
The Liberals did well among women voters in 2019, and we'll see if they can keep them. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Yarmouth, Nova Scotia.
It's a trove of leaked data on COVID-19 in BC, so what does it reveal? I'm going to speak with a data cruncher next.
There was a moment of concern at Expo 86 this afternoon on the last full day of the royal visit to the fair. The Princess of Wales fainted while touring the California Pavilion. She was caught before she fell to the ground, and after a short rest, she resumed the day's scheduled activities. Allison Smith reports.
It was the last official duty of the afternoon. The Prince and Princess of Wales were at Expo 86, visiting California, the final stop on today's Expo tour. Once inside, the princess fainted. In these slow-motion pictures, you can see her being helped to walk to a rest area. Outside, it was clear something had gone wrong. Security people were everywhere. An ambulance arrived, but it was never needed.
The princess felt very warm and fatigued after she came out of the United States pavilion, going into the California pavilion. She crumpled and was helped and assisted into the resting room.
And to answer one question before it was even asked,
the princess is not pregnant.
The princess rested and seemed to recover quickly. She left the pavilion, waving to the crowd. It had been a hectic day for the royal couple. It began early, the same way many people start their day, with a ride on a commuter train, Vancouver's SkyTrain. The couple went to Burnaby to open a children's park and meet some of the children who would play in it. For one little boy, it just wasn't good enough to give flowers to the prince. So Diana came back to get them, and the little boy knew exactly why he'd waited for the princess.
Because she's prettier.
But it was the prince who won this little boy's heart, and he was heartbroken that only the princess walked near him. This afternoon, the royal couple made the most of the theme of Expo 86, transportation. They climbed inside a spaceship at the Soviet pavilion, boarded a boat to the British pavilion, where they visited an English pub, and traveled by car to visit the U.S. pavilion. In 2 hours this afternoon, they toured 5 pavilions, shook countless hands, and for the most part, looked interested in what they saw. The royal visit here ends tomorrow. So far, the princess's brief fainting spell hasn't changed any plans. It's expected both the prince and the Princess of Wales will be able to complete all of this royal tour. Allison Smith, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that's the National for Tuesday, May the 6th. For CBC News, I'm Knowlton Nash. We'll have
The economic forecast for farmers on the prairies could be bleak. They're experiencing extremely dry conditions.
And it's prompting some limits on water use. Riley Lachuk has more tonight from Brandon, Manitoba.
Dead Horse Creek in Morden, just a trickle this spring, like many waterways across southern Manitoba. The dry conditions prompting the city to put serious restrictions on water starting now. No lawn watering, no splash pads, and no car washes.
You can take a drive to the lake and almost walk across it in certain places. Islands are popping out that have never been seen before. It's not a well-evidenced fact that we are running out of water.
Morden Mayor Brandon Burley says Lake Minnewaska, where the city gets its water, is currently more than 2 meters below where it should be. Levels he says Morden hasn't seen since 1983.
We're going to need a lot of help from Mother Nature to ensure that...
Keystone Ag President Bill Campbell says Manitoba's farmers also need water. He says while dry conditions are good for seeding, dugouts, hay fields, and other crops need water, and soon.
I can't find water in the ditch or in my fields, or I can't find water anywhere other than the well.
Campbell says the dry conditions could cause stress and irreplaceable damage to crops if it doesn't rain soon. Environment Canada senior climatologist David Phillips says overly dry conditions persist across most of southern Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and even into part of British Columbia. He says some places in Manitoba have received only a small fraction of the rain that normally falls in the spring.
So it's getting to a serious situation, and I think farmers are looking to the west. Every time there's a dark cloud, they're providing some hope, but things are just not happening. And
He says while the wettest months of the year are still to come, continued dry conditions could be an economic disaster for the prairies in the making. Riley Laychuk, CBC News, Brandon.
Yeah, drought situation there, Joe, of course. And you've also been watching our snowpack levels here in BC.
That's right. New data from the BC River Forecast Centre just coming out today. We've been watching that above seasonal snowpack for our winter and spring months. That is one part of the equation when it comes to both our spring flooding and spring-summer drought forecast. So I want to show you, I just put the raw data up here, but let me explain what you're looking at. All of these regions in white, that means your snowpack right now is about normal. And then any areas in turquoise, the blues and greens, that's above normal. And it's really just the South Thompson, Lower Thompson, and the Middle Fraser that's actually slightly below as far as snowpack. So probably not a big surprise for many of you to see that we are at or above our snowpack levels for this time of the year. And according to the BC River Forecast Centre, we've already seen about 11% melt in the past 2 weeks. So they'll be monitoring that closely. But of course, snowpack only one part of the equation, as I mentioned. Weather is going to play a huge role over May and June. To see how wet or how dry. And of course, there are two extremes we do see here in BC, the floods and the fires. So we'll keep you posted. Down through the overnight, we were starting off with some clear skies and then clouds will increase. I think we'll end up around 6, 7, and 8 for your overnight lows. And then check out tomorrow's highs. I know it was a bit of a chilly Friday out there. Very similar feel. We're still in the same air mass, so similar temperatures for tomorrow, perhaps a little less breezy as we head into the afternoon. But this is the cold front that I'm tracking. Watch as it hits Haida Gwaii. You're going to see some good rain tomorrow morning. Port Hardy, guarantee for you. But then, as I mentioned earlier, it really dissipates once it makes its way across the strait. So we will get showers tomorrow, but it's going to be a bit of a battle as far as how much. I think tomorrow is going to be a little more widespread showery, a few more clouds than we saw Friday. High pressure, though, hot on its heels for Sunday, and that one looking good as far as high level of confidence in the forecast models. A quick look at the conditions across the province tomorrow. Climbing back up to seasonal for Saturday and at or above for Sunday. Lots of sunshine, though, as you can see. Victoria hoping to get some sunshine along with those showers. There's the forecast highs for Saturday, and then as I take you through Sunday, back to seasonal and slightly above as we start to get into a nice warm high pressure that should last through most of next week. So here we go. A few showers for tomorrow, as I mentioned. I'm keeping the hope of some sunny breaks in there as well. Back into Sunday, high pressure is going to bring us the sunshine. And then as we head into early next week, this is what I like to call a royal flush forecast. Look at that, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Trust me, I didn't change any of those numbers just to get it right, although we'll have to pay attention next week to see how that pans out. But all in all, it is looking like a warming and sunny forecast.
Yeah, that's a pretty good stretch. All right. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
At 6:42, a live look out into Burnaby. Turned out to be a nice evening on the South Coast. It's Friday, the weekend is here, and we've got more news coming up.
You know what, I think I had quite an unconventional path here, so it feels really rewarding to finally end up on this team and be wearing the maple leaf. Hi, my name is Fran Acorn. I'm from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and I'm on the Canadian National Development Short Track team. Pre-COVID, I had been on such an upward trajectory. It was my first full year training with the Olympic Oval in Calgary. I was feeling at the top of my game, and then COVID came around and I lost a lot of momentum. Before my last competition of the season, everything got canceled, you know, and it was pretty heartbreaking. I definitely had to reframe and just think about things that were in my control and out of my control, and not put so much pressure on myself to keep progressing and progressing. It was great, actually, going back to the north. I went back in December and stayed there until the end of March. I was training on my own, but it was fantastic to be with my family and kind of have a little bit of stability. I went snowshoeing a ton. I didn't get out skiing this year, but you know, just getting outside, it was a big part of just not just training, but kind of centering myself when everything was so up in the air. I'm so excited to be here. Training's going great. It feels great to be back on the ice with other people because I've been training alone in the north for some time. You know what? For me, just being on the dev team is a really big deal. I think the north has done such a good job, like the NWT in particular, of keeping a lock on COVID, so I do think I'm a little desensitized. I'm pretty freaked out about it, but I'm doing everything in my control to be safe. All of the athletes, you know, we have special permission to keep training because it's an Olympic year, so they are all taking a lot of measures to make sure that we still can have this privilege throughout the training season. Olympics 2026 is where it's at for me. Like, I'll be 22 years old. That's a pretty good age to strive for a goal like that. So right now it's all about experience and, you know, pushing towards that. I'm just gonna keep my head down, work hard, be as happy as I possibly can be while I'm out here.
The world is not back to normal. Life has not fully resumed. We are not at the finish line yet.
We know we can do it.
As phase 3 of the economic
New
restart
COVID
plan.
restrictions will mean that elementary.
In times like these, get trusted news from a trusted source, your public broadcaster. Anytime, anywhere, anyway. CBC Vancouver. Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
That's an illegal crab trap. People drop them here and use the GPS to locate them, and then they drag a line at nighttime and pick them up.
More than 250 illegal crab traps have been discovered in English Bay, a troubling problem along the BC coast. Poachers sell the crabs on the black market.
Very relieved. So yeah, it's really good. Close to back to normal.
Some restaurant workers in BC can now book COVID-19 vaccine appointments. Those in Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health will get the jab. And leaked internal documents show health officials in BC have been withholding detailed data on COVID-19. The reports contain more detailed breakdowns of vaccinations, variants, and case counts.
So let's go a little deeper with this. Killeen is an SFU data researcher on public health. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello.
Now that this data is out there, what stands out for you in terms of the specifics of the information?
So to me, one of the things that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people are focusing on, is reopening and vaccination. So I was interested to see the vaccination fractions by age, and I think seeing that, with geographical resolution would also be an interesting take, just to think through where are we at, how close are we to that kind of practical idea of herd immunity and reopening, and what's uptake like as we move into the next stage where we have higher vaccine availability. To me, that was really interesting. Of course, another angle that hasn't often been in the public releases is just the geographic resolution, and so that's of course interesting to see, especially in the Lower Mainland where most of the cases have been.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Those neighborhood level breakdowns are available in Ontario and other provinces, but most of those provinces are in worse shape than us. So in reality, would we have actually benefited from having that information earlier?
Yeah, that's so hard to say. And I think it's, one of the things that has really been a benefit in Ontario is using those data to understand how disproportionate the burden has been of COVID on neighborhoods with a high number of essential workers, people who can't distance at work, who work in person, who work with the public or with contact with others. And I think that did help change the conversation, especially when the Ontario Science Table looked at vaccination rates in neighborhoods. So that's something, it really shows that it's not so much having the data, but acting on those data. And I think in BC, we announced the essential workers vaccination program actually earlier, and started to roll that out. And then, of course, there were changes around AstraZeneca that happened at the same time. So I think there can be benefits to sharing. I would be really interested in that kind of understanding how people responded to those data in Ontario and Quebec and Alberta. Did people look at those data and say, oh my goodness, the cases are high in my neighborhood, I'm going to stay home? Because that's what we would hope. We would hope that individuals, but also community leaders, faith leaders, GPs, nurses, people could talk to the public and say, hey, like vaccination levels are low. Like you should think about this, or let's not have a gathering, or be careful out there when you're having contact. Cases are high in our community now. So I'm not sure if that happened. That's speculation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because throughout the pandemic, the government has said that it's withholding the data because, targeting specific neighborhoods could lead to more harm than good with racism, or exactly what you said, that people will go into the neighborhoods that aren't having as much of a problem. Do you buy the government reasoning there, or do you think there's something else behind the secrecy?
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of hidden agenda. I think it's important to think through, who are the stewards of these data. So if data are gathered in Northern Health, for example, or in Island Health, I think it's down to that health authority to decide what level of aggregation it's appropriate to display and give out to the public. So it's not the case that there's some one person who has the decision-making power for all the data in the province, and they get to just pick, every day, what's the message going to be today? Like, are we going to go this level or that level? So I don't think there's an agenda around secrecy, but I also don't think that sharing these data has been particularly a priority.
SFU data researcher on public health, Killeen, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Message in a bottle in New Brunswick. Could it have come from the Titanic? Why some researchers think it just might be, next.
I'm Grant Furness. I'm the Senior Director of Animal Care and Conservation at the Assiniboine Park Conservancy. We've had 2 shutdowns. Luckily, neither of them were terribly long. We tried to look at the positive side of things, and one of those was being able to spend a lot more time with our animals and give them more of what we call animal enrichment.
Hi, guys.
The animals impacted particularly by the shutdown were the wolves, the seals, and the polar bears. The wolves. They were extremely happy to see guests coming back into the zoo, to the point of coming right up to the fence line of their habitat and wanting to interact with guests. Then secondly, the seals, which have the advantage of the windows, so they see people on a daily basis, and they were also very excited to see guests of all different ages and sizes being able to interact with them. Whoa. The polar bear that's alone at the moment, that's a decision that's made for her animal welfare. She doesn't like to be in a group. So she would get on a daily basis, let's say 3 or 4 interactions with her animal care professional. Wow. We definitely saw some sort of behavioral shift when guests were allowed back into the zoo. So during the lockdown, the entertainment part was very much enrichment again, animal enrichment. It's not just during a shutdown that we do enrichment, we do it on a daily basis. We just had a lot more opportunity. So this varies. It can go from puzzle feeders to big plastic balls that they knock around. We can then also have different spices that we would put into the camp, pepper, salt, and we also use a different variety of perfume, so they get a whole lot of different scents. It's also very important to remember that we're trying to get them to exhibit their natural behaviors, and the lockdown gave us an opportunity for the animal care staff to spend more time with them and spend a lot more time with the enrichment items. So the animals get the opportunity to either come into the exercise or not. They have that freedom of choice. They are positively reinforced with a food item, and that gives us the ability to also do a complete health check on the animal. So we can check their eyes, their teeth, their fins, their skin. It prevents us from having to anesthetize them, which puts them under a lot of stress. One of the reactions to the training is that it's highly enriching for the animal. So behaviorally, they will get a really good positive reaction from it. And it just allows the animal to understand that it's in an environment where it's going to be looked after, and at the end of the day is really happy and excited to be part of the enrichment. For animals and people alike, I think it was a huge opportunity for us to learn a lot more about them, as well as enrich their lives and see how we could make it even better for them, whether it's a lockdown or not.
Hi, I'm Amy Bao, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is a proud returning sponsor of the 20th annual DOXA Documentary Film Festival. Get your tickets and watch amazing films from the comfort of your own home, May 6th to 16th. Learn more at doxafestival.ca. And the CBC News Vancouver team wants to see your beautiful photos of beautiful British Columbia. Email your photos to bcphotos@cbc.ca for your chance to be featured.
In Saanich on Vancouver Island today, some local heroes reunited a mother and children in a daring duckling rescue.
Hi, how are you? You're ready to rock, aren't you?
8 tiny day-old ducklings fell down a storm drain with no chance of escape, but the fast-thinking rescuers used lacrosse sticks and nets to liberate the youngsters.
The feathered family didn't stay long to thank the Good Samaritans. They quickly, as you can see, waddled off to hopefully less exciting waters. Lacrosse sticks.
Yes.
That's a great idea. And stay away from those storm drains. What is it about those storm drains, anyway?
Yes, if you're listening, duckling, stay away. But yeah, a very Canadian rescue with lacrosse sticks. Yeah. Keeping on our theme of rescuing things from water theme, a letter in a bottle washed ashore in New Brunswick 4 years ago. And apparently it was from a 13-year-old girl on the Titanic.
And now researchers are trying to solve the mystery. The question is it real or a hoax?
Voilà. Et qu'est-ce qu'elle dit cette lettre? Alors cette lettre dit ici.
At home in the south of France, Hélène Lefebvre reads a letter that could be more than a century old.
Nous devons arriver à New York.
We will arrive in New York in a few days, it says. If anyone finds this, please contact the Lefebvre family in France. It appears to be signed by her cousin, Mathilde Lefebvre, just 13 years old, on board the Titanic on the 13th of April, 1912. Mathilde died the next day with 4 members of her family when the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank. Fast forward 105 years to the Bay of Fundy, New Brunswick, a Canadian family finding an old bottle on the beach.
And it remains linked to the most mythic catastrophe of the 20th century. It is fascinating.
This researcher is excited but cautious. He's one of a team literally putting the letter and bottle under a microscope to figure out if it's authentic.
The paper and the cork have provided consistent radiocarbon dates, and the chemical analysis so far also are consistent with the 1912 date.
He says such things can be faked, but they haven't found any evidence of that. There's another mystery. The Titanic went down some 600 kilometers southeast of Newfoundland. The bottle washed ashore in the Bay of Fundy, New Brunswick, 500 kilometers to the west of the wreck site. This researcher works with floating ocean probes and says the current carries almost all flotsam to European shores. But
it's not impossible. Some of those drifters do actually come back towards the Canadian coast.
the family believes the note is real and hopes it ends up in a museum. Justin Hayward, CBC News, Montreal.
There's something so human about us wanting it to be real. The mystery, the romanticism, I hope it is.
I hope
We'll
it
have to
is
stay tuned,
too.
I guess.
It would be an awfully elaborate hoax for somebody to pull off, and why would you do it? So let's hope it's real.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned for that one. I agree.
Okay.
That's it for us tonight, though. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, we're going to leave you on this Friday evening with tulips in bloom in the Fraser Valley. I think this is called Lakeland Flowers. Yes, it's in Abbotsford, and this was shot by videographer Kevin Lee. Joe, they even have a tulip U-pick there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll do the wrapping or anything for you, but there is a U-pick. And look at those.
I could go for some of those on my kitchen table.
Yeah, well, same with Mrs. K. I could be dispatched to the valley this weekend. I'm not sure. Anyway.
Good luck.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you for watching. Have a fantastic weekend. Good night.
Good night, everyone.